I remember years ago working with insurance underwriters for cyber, and they're like, you got antivirus? Yep. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Here's your policy. And now now you go through a security in cyber insurance underwriting, and it's, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
No.
So, it's one of those things that, it comes at you, and it's like, hey, answer all these questions. And it's a 60-page form. So it's the underwriters have gotten smarter in how they, are adjusting.
Welcome to the Risk Never Sleeps podcast, in which we learn about the people that are on the front lines delivering and protecting patient care. I'm Ed Gaudet, the host of our program, and today I am pleased to be joined again by Jason Alexander, VP and CISO of VCU Health. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, we spoke October, November last year.
Yeah.
Remember that I had a good conversation there. So what's happened since then? A lot, right?
Oh man, I mean, there's so much going on in the world right now. It's almost crazy. I mean, obviously, in the fall last year, we had the big breaches out with MGM, and kind of walking into this year, it was, change, and then Ascension, and it's just, it seems like it's just one thing after the other. And now you've got, potentially the U.S. has given Ukraine more freedom, and so of course they're escalating their engagement with Russia, and of course Russia is threatening to retaliate against the United States for allowing Ukraine to attack their Russian soil. So it's one thing after another for a CISO. It certainly keeps us busy these days.
The gift that keeps on giving, for sure. That's
the gift that keeps on giving. Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
So let's talk about change.
Sure.
Were you affected at all? What did you learn from it? Did you change any of your policies or procedures post the incident?
Yeah, so we were lucky not to be affected. There were some things that we looked at and some things we learned. So I mean, the first thing that any good CISO should have is a third-party database of all your connections. So when the change thing started, we immediately knew what we had. We knew how we were connected. We severed all those connections, and then we sat back and watched. And then from that point forward, really it was all on change to manage the kind of the damage path. And so that's one thing I think every CISO needs this day and age. It's because it's really becoming, in my opinion, the second biggest risk. So, users and phishing and ransomware and everything that's kind of being driven by the user these days. That's still the number one thing that keeps me up at night. But very quickly after that, it's becoming third-party supply chain. It used to be maybe IoT. It used to be maybe actually physical vulnerabilities in systems and software. But we've figured out ways to isolate and protect the systems. Users, as much as we love them and need them, are always going to be a challenge that we're going to have to work through training and education and tools and everything else. But more and more and more, we're starting to see, these third-party supply, houses, that are integrated into our systems that are getting data from us are having problems. And so you've got to have a good risk management program in the beginning. You've got to know what you've got, know where it is, have done your risk assessments. You've got to have your risk registers so that when something happens, you can go back and look and see, am I involved here? Am I not involved here? And then you've got to be ready to, take actions to mitigate, any potential risks that you may have out of that database. And so regardless of whether it's change or it's another vendor or it's, a health system Ascension, it's the game is becoming more difficult, but the rules aren't really changing. You've got to You've got to know where your threats are. You've got to know how to manage those. You've got to track them, and you've got to be able to respond to mitigate or stop, changes in that, that threat landscape. And so it is the gift that never stops giving, but it isn't really it's not a new present. It's like the world keeps re-gifting us the same thing over and over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same present, different packaging.
Yeah. Hey, I've seen that before.
Yeah. This looks familiar. Wait a minute.
Yeah. And, if you look at change is a mess. Because I think change is gonna really, it's gonna change the landscape. And I think there's a multitude of pieces of this. First, I would hope, and one never really wants the government to get involved in anything because they don't always make it better, but change is probably too big. They acquired so much stuff. They grew so much stuff. It's probably the reason why they had the failure in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming that you've heard, they announced to Congress that basically the issue started because they didn't have two-factor on a remote access gateway.
Yeah.
I don't know in this day and age how you do that. When I heard that, I was like, no, that's got to be a mistake. I actually had to go back. I didn't watch the testimony to Congress live. I had to go back and that's what the CEO said. Okay, well, that's in this day and age, that's almost, I don't want to say negligent because I don't want to assign blame, but that's kind of so 2017. 17. Well, and that's like an eon in terms.
Yeah, I know.
So obviously, if anybody's listening to this podcast and you don't have two-factor on your remote access gateways, that you ought to just stop listening to this podcast and go get started doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's great advice.
Just stop listening and go do that because you really need it.
Should we pause and wait for them to come back? The ones that are leaving right now.
I mean, just pause here and then come back and listen when you're done. That's a better idea. So I think there's definitely going to be fines. HHS and OCR are going to eat change's lunch. There's also some interesting aspects that apparently change paid the ransom. And it doesn't, it's reported that they paid $22 million. At least that's what showed up on the blockchain. It doesn't seem to have done them any good. And I have no inside information. I don't work for Change. I don't interact with Change. But just from the outside, it doesn't seem to have got them online any faster. It doesn't seem to have really helped them. It certainly didn't reduce the amount of information that's been exposed, from our veterans to, all the other customers that they have. So that's certainly gonna be an issue. But I also think it's gonna significantly change cyber insurance. I think once it all gets baked into the market, I think it's gonna drive up prices for everybody. It's kind of like a hurricane. Everybody gets hit. You get your claim, and then suddenly everybody's paying more for that insurance. And the reason I say that is that obviously, in another report, it came out that Change is self-insured. So, they're going to eat those costs as part of their bottom line. Yeah. But, a lot of other organizations that are insured are going to be making claims, not so much on their cyber breach part of their cyber insurance policies, but really most cyber insurance policies these days include, coverage for, loss of production, loss of, downtime, that kind of thing.
Right.
And those don't, that downtime doesn't have to be related to a breach. That could just be, hey, I had a significant fire in a data center and, now I've been offline for 4 days. Well, cyber insurance has got, provisions in there that cover for that. So all of these organizations that were negatively impacted by Change that couldn't do business because they couldn't process claims, they couldn't do their normal business because the Change infrastructure wasn't there, are going to be filing claims against their cyber insurance for basically this loss of revenue. The pharmacies that couldn't prescribe medications and just sat on prescriptions for weeks. Yeah. They lost revenue from, no fault of their own, just not being able to process those claims. And so, I think once all these insurance companies process these claims, it's going to drive up all of our insurance. And it's those of us that are really out there trying to do the right stuff, are going to be probably impacted just as much as those that have, caused the issue.
Yeah. Well, in that example, you mentioned hurricanes. So a systemic risk to some extent, right? But more frequent, right? More frequent. So if you look at change and you think about frequency, where's the next change? What is the next change? When is the next change? Is there a next change?
I mean, I'm sure there is. Because like I said, it doesn't, I hate to say it, but it seems like we're getting just more and more accepting of these issues, not less. You go back and you look at through the last couple of years, I mean, they're happening on a greater frequency. I don't know who the next change is going to be. I mean, it'll be somebody. Maybe it won't be somebody as big. I mean, like I said, Ascension already had a huge issue that they basically blamed on a user, which, while, we know users are a challenge, it seems bad of a health system to walk out and say, hey, well, one of our users screwed up. Sorry. But that was the approach they took.
But that was fairly isolated to Ascension and anyone affiliated with Ascension.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got other health systems that have had, the same size that have had problems. Is somebody is there going to be an issue with somebody the size of Change again? I mean, there's only so many vendors out there that are that big. It's typically the payers. It's the CVSs and the Aetnas and the Anthems, and nobody else is really that big. Will there be another vendor of the size of Change that has that kind of problem? It's hard to say. I mean, will there be another breach? Yeah, there's probably one going on right now. We just don't know about it yet.
Well, and I wonder if the biggest issue around Change was the fact that we just didn't know. I mean, I heard repeatedly from folks that they had no idea how pervasive Change was within their organization and how concentrated it was. Whereas like you take an Epic, we all know if you're an Epic user, your EHR is concentrated mostly to Epic, right? So you probably spent time and effort from an investment, procedures, process, resources to make sure that if it does go down, you can operate continually. Right. So yeah, it's an interesting point about the insurance, because will it really go up if they can't do the math on the frequency?
Well, sure, because
perspective.
Because then what the underwriters are going to do is they're going to hedge their bets on the safe side and they're going to raise the rates. And that happened to us a few years ago. There were probably around the beginning of COVID, around the beginning of the Ukraine war, prices went.
They did. That's right. Yeah.
And the reason that they went through the roof is because they didn't know what the Ukraine-Russia conflict was going to bring in terms of, cyber impact. Russia was threatening to, retaliate against the United States for supporting the Ukraine. There had been a number of breaches, previously. COVID was in play. Data was moving in weird ways that we'd never seen before. And so rates, right at the beginning of COVID went skyrocketing high.
They did, but they settled back down, and,
Sure.
It's really, and folks, got smarter about communicating what they were doing in terms of their maturity of program, the tools they were using, the processes they were using. So
the underwriter got smarter too about asking about things.
That's right. Yeah.
I remember years ago working with insurance underwriters for cyber, and they're like, you got antivirus? Yep. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Here's your policy. And now it's, now you go through a security in cyber insurance underwriting, and it's, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
No.
So, it's one of those things that, it comes at you, and it's like, hey, answer all these questions. And it's a 60-page form. So it's, the underwriters have gotten smarter in how they, are adjusting. But like I said, I think, even everybody knows Florida is going to get hit by a hurricane. I mean, it's almost inevitable. Every couple of years, there's going to be a number of serious hurricanes that are going to hit Florida. The insurance companies have built this into their model. But when the Category 5 comes and wipes out all of Miami or something like that, let's hope not. I don't, not encouraging.
Let's not manifest that, Jason.
Yeah, sorry. But when something, I think about Hurricane Katrina, and it wiped out almost the entire town and miles surrounding.
It took a while for them to come back. Yeah,
right.
That was
and so change is kind of like that. It's such a catastrophic incident that I think there will be some upward movement. Mm-hmm. Or I think there will be some organizations that don't have good risk profiles. I mean, I get insurance anymore.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And then, then they hopefully they're as big as Change and they can afford it. So,
All right, let's switch topics. Let's talk about AI. What are you doing with AI? How are you approaching it? Have you set up a separate governance? Structure, et cetera? Because this is a topic I often hear from folks. How are other folks doing it? How are the more mature organizations handling it?
Yeah, so I mean, AI is just another technology. So I mean, when you look at it, of course, there's a lot of buzz, and everybody's like, oh, well, AI was invented in 2023. No, no, it's been around for a long time. Yes, maybe a website that can regurgitate readable human language back to you is relatively new. But AI has been around for a long time, and especially in the finance industry, in healthcare, and others. I mean, we've been using AI in different ways in all kinds of medical procedures to aid physicians. Mm-hmm. So it's not suddenly like, oh, look, AI, here's this new cool thing. Let's all celebrate. We got some new technology.
Oh, hell.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. Like any new technology, it needs to be reviewed and controlled, especially in in an operational organization where you've got, pieces at play. You've got processes, you've got controls, you've got policies. And so, I think what a mature organization is going to do is they're going to, sit down probably first and look at how do we want to use AI in our business? Where does it make sense for us to use AI? And it's going to either be a subcommittee, or it's going to be, if the organization's really truly mature, it's probably just going to be part of their existing technology governance structure. They're going to say, all right, well, this is just another technology. We're going to handle it the same way. We're going to review it. Typically, a mature organization is going to put together some sort of policy and guidelines around its use. There's probably going to be controls at play for things like web filtering and really just to kind of warn people to say, hey, we're not doing ChatGTP. Don't be putting medical information in there and asking it for a diagnosis. That's not what it's for. The road that, the organizations are going to have to take is they're going to have to, build these policies, build it into their governance procedures. And so, it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be risk assessed. It needs to be determined, does the infrastructure we have in the organization support it? If we're going to do something around a large language model, are we going to buy something off the shelf, or are we going to bring one in-house and build it through, say, for example, Microsoft and Azure and the ChatGTP, integration? What
are you doing at VCU?
We're not doing any of it yet. So, I mean, we're looking at, technologies as they come. Mm-hmm. We like I said, we're doing them through our governance process, mm-hmm. and, we're evaluating where it makes sense, and where we think it makes sense, we'll go forward and do it just like any other technology. We're not running out and telling people to play on ChatGTP. Right. We're not running out and embracing Copilot, because it's, all the downside is right now is the AI is still very, very expensive. And so costs need to come down, I think, before it really makes sense for a lot of organizations. Yeah. A lot of organizations are going to kind of poke at it and say, well, that could be kind of neat, or we might do this, or we might do that. But I think if you're a truly mature organization, you're going to have the technology governance structure in place, and you're going to manage it through that workflow, just like any other. Hey, I want a new piece of medical equipment, or I want a new ERP, or I want a new EHR, or I want, some new system. You're going to manage it through that same process. And there's going to be contracting and agreements, and you're going to have to get your legal team involved, and what secondary uses of data are allowed. So, if I'm using a ChatGTP like model and I'm going to Microsoft, what are your underlying agreements? Have you signed a BAA? Have you signed a non-disclosure? Do you have those pieces in place? Are you setting your models up so that secondary use is not allowed? So, you're getting the benefit of the knowledge in the model, but you're not allowing the model to learn from the data that you're contributing. All of those things are going to have to be managed as part of any program. I think in the healthcare space, where it's really going to probably help is, Microsoft's got some new technology from their Nuance partner, around, it's called DAX Copilot. it basically integrates their Dragon dictation software with the ChatGPT model.
Right.
And so it listens to a conversation with the physician. The intent is to allow the physician to, sit there and have a conversation with the patient versus being like, all right,
Right.
Mr.
Exactly.
I'm over here typing while I'm talking to you and I'm not paying attention to you or I'm not really listening to your concerns, which drives patient satisfaction and other things.
Yeah.
So it's listening and then it's using, the knowledge that it hears to pre-draft a note for you and, potentially even, offer you some, potential orders based on the things that you talked about, well, you're experiencing a swollen ankle after you've experienced a fall. And so I'm going to, we'll get you an x-ray and we'll run a couple of blood tests. So it's listening to all that. And it says, all right, well, do you want to order an x-ray? Do you want to, and it's putting these, and you say, yes, I want to order an x-ray. Yes, I want to order this. It makes sense is in the healthcare space. It's not going to replace the physician, but it's going to automate those tasks that what they call in healthcare pajama time for physicians, and so a lot of physicians will see their patients during the day and then they'll go home and do their documentation at night. Right. If the documentation can be, 90% complete, when the visit's over and the physician just has to go in and read and say, yep, that's, it didn't make something up. So it didn't, you came in with a complaint of a sprained ankle and it says you have a broken back. I mean, well, that's wrong. Because hallucination is still a thing in AI. Yeah. Especially when you've got probably a stream of knowledge coming from a transcription piece of software, which we all know is not always perfect. Just look at the voicemails you get from your iPhone. Yeah. The transcriptions you get, some of those are like, what's the person saying?
Yeah. Well, it's a good point. I think actually, you raise an interesting point. It's sort of the equivalent of lossless audio, right? You get this fidelity that otherwise you would lose based on the time from when you see the patient to when you're actually doing your documentation, your notes. So. Yeah,
because it may be several hours before you're working on your notes, so you're going off your recall, versus this is what you went through, and you
probably saw 20 patients, 30 patients that day, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So
that's where I think AI is going to make a difference in healthcare. That, along with stuff that we've been doing for 20 years, there's a lot of radiology and pathology have a lot of potential AI uses. And when I say AI, a lot of it is image processing and learning models. Those are not the generative AI types of technologies that we think about, but they're still AI. And again, some of those models and some of those image processing and image detection pieces of software have been around for 15, 20 years. Are they as advanced as they are today? Probably not back then, but it's not. We've really got the image processing pieces, and then we've really got the generative, like content creation AI. And so we've really got kind of two areas that we're focusing in.
Plus all the RPA, the automation, anything else that can, and cross-functional too. I'm sure you're looking at it from a cyber perspective as well.
We are, we're looking at it from, what can we do to, comb through the massive amount of data that we have. I mean, we've already got some fairly sophisticated algorithms that run through our data and elevate alerts and alarms and things up to us to look at. But, are there going to be new technologies? I'll admit every second phone call I get from a vendor is, we've got the greatest AI technology. We had it for years. Really?
Let me know if we call you and to say that, because we shouldn't.
But it's that right now it's kind of like it's the buzzword.
Yeah.
We're seeing vendors take a product that they've had for 15 years, slap the letters AI at the end of the name, charge 30% more, and say, well, this is with AI. I'm like,
which is scary because they just throw the whole security model out the window. They slap on a generative AI interface, and
but it's like half of them aren't even doing generative AI. Again, it's going back to things like, we had an example of a piece of orthopedic software. It's been around for 10 years. Helps a surgeon place an implant. Same piece of software, but they put AI on the end of it because it's a smart learning program that helps you place that implant. but we have this installed now without AI on the end of it. The interface is exactly the same. So how is it?
I think they call that marketing. I think that's what's marketing.
And that's the challenge, is that everybody wants in on the AI buzzword right now. So, so every piece of software now has got an AI thrown in it. It needs AI technology. Well, explain, please. It's just AI. Trust us.
Trust us. Yeah.
And I mean, the security vendors are a little guilty of that as well.
I think everyone's a little bit in the vendor community. I think everybody's
a little guilty. Yeah, sure. I mean, but they are trying to do that in the security world. Our advanced AI will help you reduce XYZ. No. Like you say, you were founded 4 months ago. No, thank you. Not interested.
That's right. That's right. Any last advice to? I know I asked you this last time, but it's always a good perspective for listeners. Folks that are looking to get into cyber, maybe in healthcare already, maybe in IT,
sure,
thinking about a cybersecurity profession or dipping their toes in. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's something like 7,000 or 8,000 cyber openings in Virginia that are going filled right now. So there's two things I would tell people. One, so don't buy into the hype. So, I mean, just because you go off and you get a degree for cybersecurity, and don't expect to just show up and suddenly be making a 6-figure salary, because it's unrealistic. And we deal with it all the time. Individuals go to these schools, 2-year school, 3-year school, and nothing wrong with people educating themselves and gaining knowledge. But be realistic with yourself. I mean, that there are a lot of jobs out there, but there's really two pieces to it. So, get some education if you can, but also experience. And any kind of experience is good. Is it, working with servers, working on a help desk, anything that you can do in a technology field to understand how people interact with systems, how systems interact with systems, any experience that you can get is going to be a positive. And, come into an organization, especially if it's an entry-level position, with the desire to learn. That's what we look for in an interview. We don't expect someone coming in, and we're probably an odd group. We don't expect our entry level position, where we say this is an entry level position, to have 5 years of experience. And so when you come to us for an entry level position, what we want to see from you is, do you have any experience? And if you do, great. If you don't, again, it's an entry level position. We understand that. But what we're looking for is that willingness to learn, the willingness to come in and say, look, I don't know all this. I'm not going to pretend I know all this. Please teach me. And be open to, those that have been doing this day in and day out for years. I look at my team, and, every one of them is on a different part of their journey through their education, through their experience, through their progression in their careers. And, they all have worked very hard to gain knowledge, learn new things, and, really continue to drive forward and know what they need to do. So if you come into the cybersecurity space and you want to learn, make that clear. That's the best thing you can do to an organization. So look, I'm here for an entry level position, but I want to learn. I want to be taught, and absorb everything you can. And because trust me, in 3 years, it'll all be different anyway. So having a specific, path, I don't, and it used to be that, everyone, you got to go to a 4-year school, and then you got to do this, and you got to do this. And I think this day and age, there are so many different paths into cyber that not all of them are formal education. We see a lot of people coming out of the military with experience that we're hiring that didn't go through a formal, college education, but they went through a military experience. I think hiring vets is always something that we should all strive to do. But even if you're not a vet, if you can learn, you can play. There are little tiny boxes that you can buy, little mini PCs for a couple $100 that you can set up as a home lab, and you can install software, you can blow that software up, you can reinstall the software, just literally play with everything you can. Yeah. I'm a CISO, but I still have 3 mini Intel NUCs sitting here on my desk doing, one runs Linux, one runs BSD, one runs a Windows that I play around with and attack. And then of course I have my own, corporate workstation and, a couple of personal desktops. But, even at my level, I still play with stuff, just because it's always changing, and my day in and day out as a CISO is not administering software, administering services, doing that kind of stuff. But, what I want to be able to do at the CISO level is go have that coherent conversation with my team that is doing it, and be able to say, okay, well, I know what you're saying technically. I understand. Yeah. Now I'm going to go talk to the board and go board speak to them, that doesn't include anything that we just said, because they won't understand any of that. That's right. But it allows me, keeps me sharp and allows me to be the translator. So
yeah, that's a great point. Arnold Schwarzenegger used to have a saying, "Stay hungry." Mm-hmm. And I think for those folks that want to become a CISO or any role in cybersecurity, stay curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it changes so fast. I mean, even from where we were at the beginning of COVID, the world was completely different. Look, the threat matrix was completely different than it did back then. Right. I always, like I said, we still have users in the first spot, but but even then, the attacks are moving away from attacking the users. What they're doing is they're attacking the users' accounts. Look at MGM, where they called the service desk and or the help desk and convinced someone there to reset an admin's password and give it to the attack group. So, and then the malicious actors were able to use those credentials to get into the system. Yeah. And so that wasn't even a fault of the user. The attack was against the user credentials versus, actually hacking the system, because it's easier to hack a user's credentials than it is typically to compromise a firewall or, any of the other systems that are in line. If you can get in with valid credentials, most of the security systems are like, "Oh, hi, how are you? Good, have a good day." Versus, "Oh, you're an intruder, we're going to stop you." So
yeah, well, which is why multi-factor is so important.
Yeah, but even that now, 100%. Again, back to my point. If you haven't installed multi-factor, pause, go do that, come back and finish. Exactly. But even like in the MGM situation, they convinced the individual on the help desk to enroll a new cellular device. And so, the new cellular device was used to basically do the 2-factor and get into the system. So even there, 2-factor didn't save it.
The combination of those two things should have triggered a check, a double check, a triple check on that. Right. That's the learning.
That is a good piece. So if you're a CISO listening to this, that is one thing you should tell your service desk. If someone needs their password reset and needs their 2-factor reset, don't do it.
Say no.
Send it to have the service desk send it to your security team and let them deal with it, because that's just generally either someone's really, really lost and needs an education, or someone's doing something bad.
I tell my team, I'll never send you a text asking you to transfer money. I'll never ask you. I'll call you on the phone and we'll talk, and then we'll double check and we'll.
Yeah, but we're even seeing too. There have been breaches where I'm gonna plug my blog. I actually wrote an article on my blog, the grumpyciso.com, about how attackers are now attacking Verizon and AT&T. Oh, hi, I'm Jason Alexander, and I dropped my phone in the water, and I've got a new SIM and a new phone. Could you provision my account to this new SIM? With information that they've been able to acquire through either breaches or information or other sources on the dark web.
Here's my social security number. Here's my birthday. Here's my
here's the the last 4 of my driver's license.
Yeah.
Could you this? Here's my validation. Could you please set this SIM up to my phone number? And then I've take an access, then I call the help desk and say, hey, this is Jason Alexander. Can you validate me? Oh yeah, here's my 2-factor code. Boop, boop, boop. Because I just got my 2-factor code through SMS, and now I've gained access to that person's account because I stole their cell SIM. They may not notice that for a few hours. I mean, I would notice in 90 seconds when my phone stopped working. But, but an executive might not notice that for a few hours, or if they do it late at night, they may be into the system and they may have gained access to something. And so, the threat vectors are, they're changing and they're getting more and more complex, and they're involving, again, more third parties. Now you've got to trust that Verizon and AT&T do the right thing. They don't compromise that. Now, here's the other thing. If you're setting up 2-factor, do not set it up with SMS. Set it up with push notifications only. So hopefully if you've just paused and gone and set up 2-factor and come back. Sorry, you got more work to do.
Go back.
Go back and make it up right.
That's a great point, actually. That's a really great point, a great argument for push versus SMS right there alone, right?
Yeah, I mean, that you take out the ability for them to steal the cell or clone the cell. Yeah. These little flipper devices, these things are crazy, the signals they can steal. I might have one sitting here on my desk, and they're dangerous. People think their homes are safe.
Oh no, a couple guys were walking around with them at
garage doors are not.
Couldn't believe it. Like they had them at Vive and they were picking up all this stuff. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, people think they're just fun for turning TVs off in restaurants, but that's like the least simple thing they do.
Table stakes. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this has been a terrific conversation. Thanks again for joining the podcast. This is Ed Gaudet from the Risk Never Sleeps podcast. And if you're on the front lines, protecting patient safety and delivering patient care, remember to stay vigilant because risk never sleeps.